For those of you that know, I did write a book. Never thought I'd do it. Um, my issue was I was too brief. I had too much brevity. I couldn't fit an idea literally into how many pages did I end up writing here? 161 pages. So turns out you can do it. And the way that you do that, I discovered this is my quote advice, if I could even give advice here, is you can only write a book if you are so passionate about a subject and you're so knowledgeable, you have so much information ideas that it just comes spilling out onto the paper. And that's what happened with type for me. So I wrote a book. I've promoted it extensively, but it's called Marble and Sculptor, a Personality Type Manifesto. Clearly self-published. I mean, those that have read it know that you can tell that it's like it needs some work. It's the first one. My second one that should be coming out probably maybe 3 or 4 months from now is definitely a lot better. It's kind of funny that this book, this slim book, actually prompted the real book, which I consider the second book. So this one had to get out of the way to prove to myself that I could do it, and then to write the real book. And I think that's a lot of people I encourage in the community. If you have this passion, write the book, get it out of the way. It doesn't have to be perfect. This book is certainly not perfect. And then fix everything, tell your real ideas, and I think it's going to be a lot better. So this video is just kind of to go through some of it, what I think is relevant. This book is, as much as I don't like too many self-help books in the sense of, how to do better at sales, how to do better time management, how to structure your life better. This ended up probably being 50% a very extroverted thinking book about here's what you need to do to improve yourself. It's not doesn't take any like statistical approaches, like make a list and stick to it. It's not like, it doesn't feel like Tony Robbins or anything like that. But I kind of go through the first part. I talk about the intro of my life, how I came to type. I didn't have this crazy, near death moment that catalyzed my love for type. It was sort of just a place in my life where it was like things were bland. I had plateaued in my career, and then I suddenly had the space to reach deeper into type that I never had before. I was in sales. I went to film school, bounced around from sales development rep, call center to call center, landed in recruiting, got furloughed during COVID, and then during COVID decided to start this business and get real into type and turned the hobby, passion, obsession into a business. I really have to give a shout out to Eric from Talking with Famous People, because one of the chapters I have is called Type is the Metaframe. And this is a subject he talks about a lot, which is that type is the overarching superstructure that we plug into all the time. And the great thing about it is that it doesn't attack people. It does not race, color, creed, religion, gender, none of that. It's just a holistic approach to looking at people. So nothing is outside of type. So that's one of the chapters. Have my Genesis story, which some people may or may not find interesting. I talk about how it's a tool. It's just another data point. In my second book, but this point will be further fleshed out, but it is just another data point that you can use to help people understand themselves, or even better, that someone could give you to help you understand them. So when someone says to you, they say, I'm an Enneagram 6, a Virgo, and I'm an ENFP. Well, what they're giving you are data points, and this is okay. Your job is to say, is that relevant? Does it help me? And my argument with type and most personality assessments is yes, it does. So we can't ignore it as much as we'd like to avoid the box. I do explain, for the most part, the 4-letter code. I don't explain like I versus E. I don't go that basic, because all the books behind me and all the books that we know about or read, or all the YouTube channels have already talked about what the difference between I versus E and NS and TF and JP. I go through the cognitive functions. I talk about why JP is actually very important, how nobody flips from J to P, even though that seems to be the one they say does change the most. It will not. So I spend a lot of time going through that, and then I do my version of the cognitive functions. And after that section, I bounce to a section that is really about how corporations can use type, which is my experience. How can we apply it to corporations in a way that works and is not boring? So the 5 places you can use type are hiring, interviewing, job descriptions, performance management, and organizational restructuring. And I break each of those down later. And the valid criticism of the book really was that people said that they wanted more. Like essentially, I I talked about one part you could use it, and then I left it. You fill in the blanks. That was my problem. So um, there is a lot to be wanted after this book, but if you are a diligent, you could probably figure out how to apply it yourself. On page 90, I think I'm really proud of what I put here about how we can use the cognitive functions in interviewing in a corporate setting. Essentially, looking at the cognitive functions and what they desire to know, the question they fundamentally ask themselves, and saying, how can I transform that function into a question so that I could understand this person's thought process? So, for example, NE is always looking to ask what could be, what are the possibilities. So, one of the questions you could ask is, where do you think we could pivot our marketing focus? It's asking someone to take a different angle. What's an alternative approach that we could take, but we don't have to do it. But just brainstorm with me. So for TE, it asks how to do it. It's how do we do this thing? It's what's the best way to do something. So for TE, my question to a candidate would be, in a minimum of 5 steps, walk me through how to make an offer to a candidate if you're talking to a recruiter. So you're just taking the fundamental core of each function and saying, how can I, for my business, or even of like relationships, ask people these questions and see how they think. But you're using type as the methodology. Once again, the meta frame. I think one of my boldest endeavors is to try to use type to write job descriptions better. And the way that I try to do that is I try to add a mindset section within a job description that essentially is the internal dialogue that this type would have to be happy in that seat. So you can see the dichotomy would be very obvious when you would be, say you had a sales rep, and part of that would be you need someone that is outgoing, likes meeting new people, likes is okay with confrontation, likes being out at networking events. These are traits and also characteristics or internal dialogues that people might have that would basically help a candidate self-select out of the process. Someone could read that and go, well, I don't have those thoughts. These are things that don't bring me joy. I will not apply. And what you're thinking is, okay, if this is a job that I know that an extroverted thinking type would be good at, most of the time, I'm not going to be putting things that probably extroverted feelers would have in their mindset. Like instead of prioritizing what's best for the company, the question you might ask is, well, here's what I have for FE actually. What does inclusion mean to you? See, an extroverted thinking user wouldn't respond well to this. They'd be like, they'd give you maybe a definition. FE type would give you what it means or how to do it in that sense. So back to the job description, you can write a job description essentially believing that there's 3 or 4 types that would do this job really well. All types could do it, but we want types to do it really well. And we know how the functions act, and we can ask questions on each of those functions. So if you need an INTP, you'd ask a TI, an NE, and an SI question. I mean, you could ask all 4. You could ask an FE question at the end, but see how they react and see what kind of answers you get. So the goal really would be you don't know the type of the person when they come into the interview. So you could ask questions that are heavy into the function you'd need. TI question. You could ask those, and then if they can't give you an answer, they might not be your person. Another section is performance management. And the performance management part is understanding the weaknesses of types and then managing those weaknesses, understanding their weakness or their inferior function. So an ENTP I'd be really good with NE, but really bad with SI or not great with SI. And you could help them by trying to understand what's worked for them before, or a good jumping off point that's something that they can say is tried and true, and remind them to stick to the things that you know or know work instead of trying new things just for the hell of it. The other sense, like an INTP, I've had this client before, is understanding to use more inclusive language like we and us, and not I or me, or an accusatory you. So you're looking at that and going, they're not using inclusive language when doling out rewards and or punishment. I don't want to say punishment, but when they're criticizing, you can use FE language to get more buy-in and to be a better boss. And that's typically what happens with bad FE users, is they have trouble with articulating a point to somebody without stomping over them. I did write a little bit about organizational restructuring. This is kind of more an idealist pie in the sky idea, but I did just want to talk about it in the book, which was you can type your entire org chart and then figure out hiring gaps for the future. And then if you are going to restructure, where you think certain types might fit better if you're going to move them, or you need to move them to a different team, you could try it. I mean, the worst thing is it won't get worse. That would be my guarantee. It's not going to get worse, but there's a really high chance it'll get better. I really didn't like the way that I saw corporations using type from the workshop point of view. And I talk about, if you had to have a workshop, here's what you should do. But the workshop model doesn't really work as well I think it should, because half the time the people that are there because their boss told them to be there. So they come in thinking it's stupid, it's a waste of time, I could be working, we could take this on our own, I don't need to spend a half day on this. And then they're poopy pants the whole time, and they don't actually listen, or they don't know their type, or they come into it not thinking it's going to work. So what they do is they detract from the overall experience and the implementation of the workshop afterwards, going forward, being a good teammate. I see these people all the time, they go, yeah, I took it last year at a workshop, I don't remember what my type was, but yeah, I don't know, it was just, I don't believe in that stuff. And then it's like, well, then why are there so many type practitioners doing workshops? Who's the workshop for? You? To get paid? See, that's not good. I then have a section at the end that's my essential resources. I go through my favorite list of YouTubers, the reason why I think they're very valuable. I go through my entire list of books that I believe can help you on your path to self-development, understanding type more. I kind of go through from, Mbti 100 up with like David Kiersey to, PhD level stuff with John Beebe. And I write a little bit about why each one is powerful, what you're going to get out of it. Acknowledgement section, of course, but then I have a part that I was actually, this appendix sort of spurred the beginning of my next book, but the appendix is Does Your Type Change? And I spent a lot of time here referencing people like Dara Nardi, Otto Krager, some books, Carl Jung himself, talking about, does type change? What do the sources say? What does the data say? What does, Personality Junkie say? And I quote these articles and pieces from books, and to make the claim that we have a structure of a house as our personality. We can change parts of the house. We can slap a new color of paint. We can rearrange the furniture. We can have different people living in different rooms. We could do anything inside of it, but the core structure stays the same. First thing people are going to say is, well, what if like there's an earthquake and the foundation shakes? Well, that's like mental illness or addiction or something where it's type, then it becomes hard to type people. Yes, it could change, or trauma, but these are not good arguments for why well-adjusted people don't have a type, or why their type might change. So it was fun to write it. I think I just gave you a very brief overview, but it is a one sit reading. It's 160 pages, but I I am not an academic, so I do not try to be dense and I try to get to the point. So I think you'll like it. The Marble and Sculptor title comes from a quote by Alexis Carrel that says, "Man cannot remake himself, for he is both marble and sculptor." And I feel like that's a really good quote for what happens when you take the type journey. It's one of those things where that's why I think people don't want to take it, because you start to see yourself in a way that might be too revealing, or you'll have to face some things that you don't want to. But the only way I think to um, the true self or differentiation is through the painful process of type discovery. So it's on Amazon. It's on Etsy. Etsy, you can get it. You can get it as a PDF download. You can also get a signed copy from me, and then it's also on Audible, which was a whole trying to read trying to do an Audible book yourself is hard. Try to read your own writing for 5 minutes straight for a chapter. It is brutal, but it was worth it. It's one of those things I want to see if I could do, and I did, and it was fun. And that is all the platforms it is on, but it's on Kindle too. That's just I am very surprised how many people bought it on Kindle. So, anyways, I encourage everyone that has this passion for writing to do it. Any type can write, but I appreciate your support. Sorry I've been gone for a little bit, but definitely want to get back and do some new, unique, creative content. Thanks for watching.